Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello girls, and welcome to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's online coach. Today, I've got Sophie. Sophie is a women's holistic health coach and educator. Now, Sophie is known as Sophie May, and she specializes in working with women not to only help them achieve their fitness or physical base goals, but she also works with them on a health level, whether it's fixing up their periods, their hormones, and their gut health to help them get their health back on track as well. Now, Sophie started off as a personal trainer from the age of 17, and she wanted to train people. And as she got older, she found her passion in more of the niche of women's health, and it's kind of led her into where she is today. And we're going to chat all about this around her experiences around being a personal trainer, or even experience as a teen who came into the fitness industry as well. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be on here. I thought I would just give you a little bit of a background to, I guess, how I got into the industry, because it might sort of make a little bit more sense with kind of what I specialize in. So as you said, I got into the industry when I was pretty young. I think I was 17 when I was one of the youngest in like my year group at school. So it sounds quite young, but when I finished school, I was only 16. So when I left school, I completed my PT course, and pretty sure I finished it by the time I was 17, maybe towards even 18. And how I got to that stage was actually quite a few years before that. So I was really, really young when I first entered the fitness industry, as in kind of getting into like training and I guess Instagram side of things. So as all teenagers are on social media, I think when I was 14, it was kind of like Instagram was up and coming and it was a new thing, and people used to post like random photos of their like lunch and stuff like that. It was never really like a business platform, I guess, like it is now. And when I was about 14, I wasn't super overweight. I was a little bit chubby, probably ate, didn't really think about what I was eating like most teenagers don't. And I came across this, I won't name them, but I came across this personal trainer who was quite big and had all these programs and stuff. And I could see all the women doing it and the progress photos, and they were, going from being sort of overweight to being super shredded. And I was like, wow, like maybe I can do this. So obviously being 14, I like went up to my mom and I was like, look at this, like look at their progress. And, I was like, can you please buy this for me and I'll pay you back? Because obviously I didn't have a card or anything. So I bought this online program, started doing it. And then that's actually where it kind of took like a bit of a downturn, I guess. So I ended up just sort of exercising. I was quite unfit when I was doing the program. I realized how unfit I was. I couldn't even do like one burpee. And then as I was going on and on and on, and the scales kept dropping, it kind of got addictive to see the scales drop. And then it was kind of, it was a bit of a blur like those couple of years, but I got progressively worse as the months went on. And I think I ended up losing like 15 kilos in the space of maybe 3 to 6 months. I can't remember the exact amount, which probably to some people is like, wow, that's awesome. But for someone who wasn't super overweight in the first place, and being a 14-year-old, it's probably not a good thing, or it wasn't a good thing for me. So lost all this weight. I had a six-pack and I had, I was super lean. And people sort of kept saying how amazing I was looking, and it kind of just, I guess, further fueled it because I was getting those compliments. And I think because when I was younger, I was overweight and I was very sort of like aware of that or self-conscious of that from a young age. I think people finally saying, oh, you know, how did you do it? You're looking amazing, kind of made me think, oh, like people think I look good. I'm going to keep doing what I'm doing. So it didn't make me kind of stop there. It kind of drove me to go further. So that's kind of like what happened. And in that time, I also lost my period for 2 years. So that's another reason why I kind of got into the women's health side of things and making sure sort of that other women don't go down that same path with, you know, restrictive eating, going too far, and, you know, I guess following these group, not that all group programs are bad, but I think when you've got young women that are new to the fitness scene and stuff, for me personally, I feel like giving them a program and a meal plan that everyone else is getting can further damage them because they're not having things individualized for themselves, you know. So I think I was eating maybe 1,400 calories because that's what the meal plan told me to do. When in reality, you know, I probably could have been eating a lot more to diet on if I really wanted to, but I wasn't aware of that. So that's kind of what led me to getting into being a PT. I was like, you know, I don't want people to make the same mistake. I want people to, if they want to lose weight, to do it in a healthy way. And then started as a PT. I worked in England as a PT as well, which was really awesome. And then I always wanted to kind of go online, but I guess what really gave me the kick was COVID. When we had lockdowns, I was like, okay, I can't sit on my bum and do nothing for the next 6 months. And I'm getting paid like all of my colleagues from the gym by the government. So that kind of further drove me because I was like, I'd spent a little bit of money when I was 18 to 20 on traveling and that. And so I was paying off a couple of things at the same time and not earning anything. So it was a little bit of like a stress kick up the bum. And then I got into online, started as just a online coach, I guess. And then as I further got down into that, found my more specific passion of, you know, hormones, helping women actually improve their health as well as physique goals and stuff as well. Because I think everyone tends to have physique goals, but most of the time we're kind of ignoring the health side as well. So I kind of wanted to bridge the gap between that, I think. So that's a little bit of a long rundown, but that's me.
I love it. I love the concept that now you're taking care, well, you're helping women more around the health side of things and not only navigating physique, as you mentioned, but like looking and diving a little bit deeper into what's actually happening. And you know what? I think the best way to do this is from my experience. Like, you know, as you mentioned, like you did these online programs, you lost all this weight, but you just weren't sure if it was actually the proper way of doing it. You lost your period, and then it got you into like this down spiral of like health issues where now you're so aware of it and you've been studying it for so long. You're like, I don't want another woman to go through this. Like, I need to make sure that they're well informed. They understand that, hey, you cannot do a program for 4 or 5 days and eat like a freaking rabbit.
Yeah.
And expect results. And I love the fact how now the industry is changing. Like over the last couple of years, there's been this awesome transition where it's literally not just fat loss anymore. It's like performance, it's strength, it's like being empowered to actually have a healthy period. Women are talking about periods as well. Like, I don't know about you, but like during high school, no one got taught like what a period was, what ovulation was, like how to navigate it, you know, what was happening down there during ovulation. Like, you know, when you're like wet and you're like, oh my God, I peed my pants. It's just like, no, actually it's not, it's vaginal mucus. You're just not aware of what's happening. So I think that's a beautiful thing that what you're doing right now is educating women around this. And yeah, it's going to explore a lot of many things moving forward.
100%. And like you said, like when I was younger and I was on Instagram and I had a fitness account, and it's actually the same account that I use now for business. It's just that from memory, I think I wiped a lot of my old stuff off of it. So it may not seem like that, but that was actually the account I set up, and I've always had the name Sophie May Fitness, which is why it's just stayed. And there was nothing about, you know, women eating a lot and getting strong. And I was in a really weird position when I was coming into the fitness industry because Instagram was new.
Yeah.
And so was kind of like women in the fitness industry, not necessarily in it, but I guess women training and stuff, because when I was getting into it, it was about the thigh gap and the shredded abs and sort of having hip bones and being super skinny. Like,
yes,
there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, if some people have natural sort of thinner genes, I guess, where they're naturally skinny. But the trend at the time was hip bones and thigh gaps and things that not everyone are going to have. And I think that was a pretty dangerous spot for the industry to be in, for people to follow those things, because unfortunately people just can't get to that position. And I was kind of following that trend. And it took me so long to realize that my body's never, ever going to look like that, because I just don't have the structure like that. I've never been petite, and I'm never going to get to that stage. And it just further drove me down into the ground, really. But it's awesome to see the shift of, you know, women actually lifting weights, focusing on being strong, and having that kind of, I guess, environment where it's not all about how shredded you are. You know, it's getting in the gym and lifting for health and focusing on other things except for just purely how you look. And then coming in with it, with the period side of things too. Like you said, when we were at school, there's like nothing about periods. Like I had to do so much of my own research to actually learn anything. And it's a lot of it's basic stuff that should have been taught when you're a teenager. And I just think now, like, imagine how different women would be if they were simply just taught body autonomy from the age of 14, and they learned that for a couple of years before leaving school, you know?
Mm-hmm. Oh my God, you made such great points there. And I'm so glad you brought up the thigh gap and the hip bones, because I reckon like we're a similar age that we were going through through that stage, because I remember during my time when I started the fitness, my fitness journey, all I wanted to do was have shredded abs and thigh gap. And like, I have lovely thighs, and I could not ever get a thigh gap unless I literally just like squished it. And you know, it sounds really bad, but to make it more of a thigh gap, I used to wrap, not sellotape, what's that wrapping paper, that you put, oh my God, I can't think of it. But anyway, I would like wrap my thighs together to get them as skinny as possible, put my jeans on, and hope that they would stay small and like tiny so you could see like that gap. And thinking about this right now, like thinking about this right now, going, oh my God, through all these years, I was trying to be something that I was trying to be so small where it wasn't empowering at all. It was just putting me down because I wasn't looking a certain way, like the magazines or like the people that, you know, we were looking up to. And coming into summer right now into Australia, no one's really worried about getting shredded now. Everyone's like, you know, that hot girl summer, it's just like getting strong. It's like being empowered, being healthy, like slowing down. And it's just so beautiful to see that transition instead of getting those peak like 8, 12 or like whatever 16-week challenges that like, you know, get shredded, let's do this. People, like women, are noticing the change there, and they're just not as worried anymore about the external. They're really focusing on like what's happening inside.
Yeah, and I think as well, another thing to where you kind of mentioned within that is like when I was, and probably yourself, sort of looking, we were focusing on the abs and the thigh gaps and all of that, and there was such a like unrealistic expectation of how long results take, you know, like I was under the impression that, like if I did this for 30 days, I'd be a completely different person. And it was so distorted thanks to photos on Instagram of like, look what this person's done in 2 weeks. And it's like, now I feel like this is something I personally promote a lot, but I do feel like it's getting better with the expectation of, if someone did have physique goals, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that as long as it's coming from a good place.
Yeah.
But the expectation of what needs to be done and doing it in a sustainable way is going to take more than just 30 days. And that's why I personally don't offer or really like sort of 6-week challenges and stuff, because to me, when I was younger, it gave me a really bad impression of fitness and health and stuff. And I personally just think that for myself, I want to give women realistic expectations of, it's not just about what you're eating, and it's not just about giving you a meal plan of eat this, this, and this. It's learning, and it's kind of your routine and your habits, and also like actually making sure that you're maybe not, you don't have to, I guess, be in love with yourself, but even just acceptance of yourself. I think a lot of people go into these things with kind of, they kind of go into it with a drive because they hate themselves instead of because they sort of like themselves, but they want to make a few changes as well. So I think there's a lot more to it.
Yeah, I completely agree with all of that. It's fascinating how, back then, and you know what, it probably still is around like those 6-week challenges, those transformations, and it's probably going to stay there for a while because it sells, sexy sells.
Yeah.
So, but I love that you mentioned that, hey, it's not just about that transformation. It's the habit formations. It's like, dealing with your period, not just on a monthly basis, but like on a yearly basis, and just changing that narrative for clients going, hey, it's awesome that you want to look like this in 2 months' time, but what is it, how do you envision yourself looking in a year's time? Like, what does that really look like for you? And planting that, big picture in their head, that's when you notice like the change in their mindset around that.
100%, definitely. And the problem, I feel like social media plays a massive part because we're all exposed to everything. It's not just, you're not just exposed to who you see at the gym and who you see at work. You're now exposed to everyone online. And I know for myself that I was really bad at comparing myself to other people. So I would look at someone who maybe was in really good shape or was super good looking, and then that would make me actually feel worse about myself because I would feel like ugly, or I would feel like I wasn't in good enough shape. And it took me so long to realize that just because someone else looks good or I think someone else looks really pretty, it doesn't take that away from other people or myself sort of being like that either. And I think when you're exposed to all of, let's be honest, there's a lot of fakeness on social media, Photoshop, celebs, and all that kind of stuff. It's really hard to try and love yourself when you're exposed to everyone kind of wanting to change themselves as well.
Yeah.
And I know for me, a big thing when I was going through all of those struggles was I unfollowed everyone. I unfollowed all the celebs, all the fitness people, except for people that made me feel better and kind of made me want to get stronger and stuff. I just got rid of them so I couldn't see them every day. And to me, it really made a massive difference.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And I love the fact that you mentioned that because that's something that I'm really big on, because I went through that transition where I just felt as if I wasn't good enough, not pretty enough, not strong enough, is because I was comparing myself to these kind of people. And similar scenarios happen to certain clients, and they're like, I just want to look this certain way. I want to be like her. And it's just like, well, how about looking like yourself?
Yeah.
How about we, focus on what it is that you want to look like, not because, Susie around the corner has the shredded abs and like a big fat booty, but realistically, her genes are different. Her diet is different. Her lifestyle is different. Like, let's focus on what you can achieve. And also regarding social media, it can be such a beautiful place, but it can also be a very toxic place. And especially around women's health and fat loss, they get sold the idea the diet shakes solve your fat loss problems, or like eating low carb diets, low fat, the old nutritional myths that we got sold back then. that they're still getting sold at. Like, HIIT is still around. 1,200 calories is still around. It's just like, oh my God, like, I thought we came over this, you know, but it's circling. It keeps coming back. But like you said, we're the ones who have to just, you know, stick to our guns and be like, cool guys, like that shit does not work. You need to focus on the other important shit, like actually getting a good night's sleep or doing your strength training properly, not just hitting the gym because you think, you know, it's for fat loss, but changing that narrative, I think is a huge one.
Yeah, and that's exactly why I kind of took a more of a health approach, because like you mentioned, there is still the 1,200 classic calorie meal plans and stuff going round. And I had a girl talk to me a couple of weeks ago, and she has PCOS, and her other trainer put her on, I think, 1,300 calories and, you know, a really restrictive diet and training every day with circuit training. And I just think, like, how are we still doing that? Like, it's so wrong. And it's further, I could see how it kind of further drove her the other way. And on my social media, I try not to talk about other people or, you know, name anyone, but if I see shit advice, like, I will call it out, because these people have a duty of care. Like, when you're a health professional, you have a duty of care to be making sure the advice that you're giving out isn't going to damage anyone or, you know, put them in a worse position. And when you see advice like that, it's really hard to not speak up about it, when for me, that was the advice that drove me into the ground. So I try not to do it, but if I do see something like that, it also is a big value to me that I don't want women falling for that and following that advice as well.
Yeah, and hopefully our listeners have a little bit of understanding around like what you need to do around PCOS. You know, for those who are not sure, I would definitely look at doing a little bit more research around it and finding what the root cause is of your PCOS. So for our listeners, if you're, you know, already educated around this, you would know that there's different types of PCOS. But I really like that you mentioned about that client, you know, eating those certain amount of calories and doing like HIIT sessions where, you know, if you just do that, it's just going to set you to failure.
And it's such a classic thing, like a lot of trainers, and it's fine to not know everything. Like, I don't know everything.
Me neither.
Yeah, like, it's fine. Like, there's stuff that I'm not clued up on, which is fine. And there's stuff that I'm maybe really good at, because I have everyone has their different bits. But I also think that if you don't know how to help someone, we have to give them, you know, the best that we can. And if we don't know what to do, then either seek help or pass them on. And with PCOS, like, you would probably see this as well, I still see the classic advice of, this woman has PCOS, so she's going to need low calories and HIIT training to be able to lose any fat. And I'm like, that is so old school, and also like the complete wrong advice.
Yeah.
Like, it's still doing the rounds now. And I just feel sorry for people with PCOS, because they get so many mixed advice from people, and they get that kind of advice. And imagine how defeating that is, thinking, oh, I'm never going to be able to lose fat. I've got to eat 1,000 calories and I'm never going to be able to eat that.
Yeah.
You know? It's defeating for people as well.
Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, it's crazy. But like, you know, like Sophie said, you know, if you don't know something, make sure that you seek out for help or do a little bit more research around, like, you know, Sophie and I are not in this position right now from, you know, just stepping on the gym floor. We, like, over the years, we've been learning different styles of training and, you know, the health protocols. So again, like, when looking at PCOS, like you mentioned, like, that low calorie diet, that HIIT training is just, it's not your solution to fix what the root cause is. You have to dive much, much deeper into it to actually assess what's going on. And most likely you need to assess your bloods, you know, like, not many personal trainers do that. So they can only see one picture of the whole scenario of the PCOS. They're only seeing the external, where if you get your bloods done, you'll be able to have a better understanding of what's actually happening inside of you. And that's where you want to find out what that root cause is, or the root drive of that PCOS.
Yeah, and that's for any health issues as well. Like, something I often say quite a lot, and something that I've delved into a lot in the last kind of, I'd say 12 months, is when we have health issues or symptoms of any kind of sort, blood work is the best way to go about seeing what's actually going on inside the body, because it gives us direct information of, you know, how certain things are functioning, what our numbers are, and if they're within range, and if something's out of range, okay, what's going on there. So blood work is 100% like the best way to just see how the body's going on the inside, because, you know, as much as we can lose weight and we can go to the gym and we can do all these things, I think sometimes it's still good to check up on the inside, because you may not see things from the outside, you know?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, this is resonating with me so much, because I'm a big believer of looking at clients' bloods, or like any form of internal health that you can get from a client, whether it's stool tests as well, you know. I love talking about poo to my clients, so they'll probably be laughing right now going, yep, she always makes me to do that. But again, it just depends on how deep you want to go. And like Sophie said, you know, if there's something that you're unsure of, do your study. But even get a mentor, get someone who does this for a living, so you can learn from it. So then eventually you can educate your clients as well.
Yeah, that's the best way to learn, I think, because like when you can do courses and stuff, which is awesome, but I'll use the PT course as an example, because I'm guessing there's probably quite a few people who've done that. Like for me, the PT course, I just was an entry into being able to work as a PT. I learned most of my info from other personal trainers who I was working alongside, other coaches in the industry that I even got a coach myself to learn from. I would say, and like, because you can be a little bit more practical with it as well. For me, that's the best way to learn, I find, is like hands-on case studies, learning from someone else instead of like purely just reading as well, really helps me. So like you said, like getting a mentor is probably, especially when it comes to more of the deeper stuff, is probably the easiest way to learn. Because yeah, you can read information and you can do this, which is still awesome, and I still do that myself, books and all that, but also having that person that knows more than you, that you can ask questions, you can get a little bit more specific, you can't ask a book a question, you know, things like that. So that really helps with just going a little bit further and having the hands-on, like first-hand experience of actually working with clients and what you would do in certain situations and stuff, for sure.
Yeah, I love that. Every coach needs to have a coach or a mentor. That, like, to be honest, I totally agree with that. That's probably one of the best ways for you to learn. And who knows, one day for our listeners who are coaches, you may be coaching another coach. So
exactly.
there's so much beauty from this. You'll just keep evolving and be able to evolve and impact other people's lives for the better.
For sure. And I think one of, like personally for me, one of my favorite things is, like, obviously I mentioned that I'm a women's health coach, but actually talking not to just clients, but other coaches on the importance of a women's cycle, because there are a lot of coaches who have done a couple of like webinars with myself who have kind of gone, wow, like I never learned any of this in school, or some of the male coaches who joined, which is really awesome to get them on board and wanting to help their female clients more as well, is going through like why we have cycles in the first place. Because I feel like there's still such a, you know, oh, well, your period doesn't matter unless you want to have a baby kind of thing. And that's purely just coming from a place of misunderstanding. And people, I think when they start learning about their cycles and their periods and why they're there and what their function is, they kind of realize, like a lot of my clients have said to me, like, wow, like, you know, now that I know where I'm at in my cycle and in my check-ins when we're talking about things, I've realized how much it's helped me kind of put things together or be a little bit more understanding of my body and what's going on. Because at the end of the day, women have fluctuating hormones through the month. You're not going to be the same every single week of the month, or the cycle I should say, is going to be a different hormonal profile. So we're going to feel different things at different stages. And I think understanding those things and being in touch with it and being able to know what's going on within the body can be actually so powerful for women, just to be able to actually sort of be a little bit more in touch with their emotions or how they're feeling or their energy levels, even just things like being social and stuff like that. Like, I know for myself, I'm a lot more social at different times of my cycle. Like, there's a lot of times where I'm a little bit more tolerative of people and have a lot more energy. And there's other times where I'm kind of like, oh, like I can't bother socializing today. Like, I really don't feel like it. And when I look into it, I can pinpoint usually when it is in my cycle. So even random things like that, like, kind of just start making more sense when you know what's going on.
Yeah, I love that you mentioned that, because that also takes us into more of the, like, we're not going to touch so much into it today, but like regarding programming as well, because like there's a lot of information out there that, you know, you need a program around your cycle. Some people say you do, some people say you don't, but we also need to understand that we all have cycles within cycles, but our cycles are completely different. So my cycle will be different to Sophie's. So you can't really predict how you're going to measure your, like, my program to her. Again, it comes down to, you know, having your coach by your side to assist you in regarding this, because, you know, I may train really well on my period compared to, let's say, you know, for example, Sophie trains really well during her ovulation. Like, it's going to be completely different, and women need to understand that programming around your personal cycle will empower you. You can't copy, let's say, my program around my cycle, because it might not relate to your situation.
Yeah, 100%. I'm glad you brought this up, because like, programming around the cycle is going to tie into what I basically just mentioned with emotions and feelings and stuff as well. So it kind of all comes together. But when we're talking about programming, exactly what you said, even though we all have a textbook example of what's going on within a cycle, yes, that's still occurring, but the lengths, the times, where people feel better than others are all going to be different person to person. Yeah. So often I get the question when on my webinars, people will be like, okay, so do I program all my female clients ahead of their cycle? And my answer to this personally is no, because it's going to take you a solid 3 months to actually get to know that person individually, how they're feeling at every single week of the cycle. Mm-hmm. So first of all, if you're just programming based on a textbook cycle, it's probably not going to be in line with that person. Classic example of this is that for me, I usually feel really fatigued before I get my period, but once I get my period, I actually feel a lot better. Whereas other people feel absolutely fine, and then the day they get the period, they feel really fatigued, they feel low on energy for a couple of days. And that's just one example of how it differs. So if you're programming someone to feel, maybe have lower intensity sessions the day they get the period, they may be fine on that day. They may not need that. So for me, I personally educate clients on, you know, it can be normal to feel lower on energy when your hormones are dropping. It can be normal to need to drop your weights a little bit, possibly even just go for a walk on the day that you may not feel the best out of the cycle. But I personally don't like planning ahead. I like giving them options to choose from and to decide when they need to use them. Otherwise, we're giving people something that they may not actually need to even, like, they may not need a lower intensity session on that specific day. They might be feeling great. You know, it could be the day before their cycle and they might even get a PB. So if we're forcing them to train at a lower intensity when they don't need it, we're kind of also forcing them to come away from being in touch with themselves and their body, because they're expecting to feel a certain way and they're kind of planning for a textbook cycle instead of their specific cycle. And another classic one with this is, I saw a post on Instagram the other day actually, and it was a sponsored post, so I didn't follow the person, can't even remember who it was, but it had like 4 circles of what kind of training you should be doing at each phase of your cycle. And I just thought to myself, I was like, where do people get this information from? Because there isn't a textbook what kind of exercise. Like, I think it was like follicular phase, you should be doing, I don't know, kickboxing, and then ovulation, you should be doing weightlifting, and then menstrual, you should be doing yoga. And like, it was really specific. And I just thought, let's be honest, most people aren't going to be doing 4 different types of exercise. You know, for me, it's weightlifting and walking pretty much. That's my main forms. So I just feel like we have to be in touch with ourselves. And yes, it's okay to have tools to use if you need them, but programming around your cycle is going to be specific to you, because you are going to know how you're feeling, where your energy levels are best and where they're maybe not. And then you can program to that to allow you to be able to have the best sort of style that fits your month, really.
Yeah, I agree with literally everything that you've just said. And it's so frustrating as a coach to see that false information on Instagram, because it's like, it's a very easy sell for someone to be like, yeah, so you got to do this and this and this. And unfortunately, most people don't know any better and they will follow it. But this is where we're going to make the difference. This is where us coaches who are in the industry right now, for those who are listening and becoming coaches, you're going to have a better understanding of how to teach your clients the proper way and make them understand that each one of us is completely different, and not everyone is going to be on the same program. You could do the same program, but it's going to affect you completely different. Like, you know, the results that I may get will be completely different to what Sophie gets. And that's something that every individual needs to be considering, like basis on their abilities and the certain times of their cycle. And you know what? It's so empowering to have a better understanding of how you're feeling and the different experiences that you're having through your cycle, because as a woman, you'll be able to better gauge your basis around that. And that way you'll be like, cool, all right, I can do X, Y, and Z during my follicular. I can do blah, blah, blah during my luteal phase, or whatever it is. So that way you're more empowered about the choices that you're making and not taking on misinformation from God knows who.
Exactly. Yeah, no, it's so true. It's like, well, it's like, yeah, okay, I could do yoga in my luteal phase if I wanted to, but if I've got energy and I'm feeling good, why would I force myself to not do my weightlifting when that's what I actually want to do? So I think tracking your cycle is so important, like tracking your specific cycle. And there's tons of apps you can use where you can even log your symptoms so that you can see where you're feeling best. And I know after many like months and even years of tracking me specifically and really getting deep with how I'm feeling, I noticed for me, that sort of like where my period's starting to finish, sort of around day 5 for me personally, I noticed this massive like spike in energy and motivation and productivity. And I know for me that kind of week is a really awesome week for me to push and train really hard, and the energy is so high. And then it kind of sort of, it doesn't dip too much, but it kind of, that week is definitely my best. Whereas some of my friends or other coaches that I know in the industry, they feel better around ovulation, or maybe they feel great after it. So it just goes to show that everyone really will have different feelings and, you know, different parts of the cycle where they're going to feel best as well.
I love that. Such a good point to finish off with, by letting everyone know that everyone's going to have different feelings around this cycle, which will be completely different to all of us. And to finish on that note, like you mentioned, is to, if you're not tracking your cycle just yet, it would be a good way for you girls to start doing some tracking, like download an app, start placing in your symptoms, seeing what's happening around your training or around your lifestyle habits, and noticing to be a little bit more in touch with how you actually feel instead of what's actually happening on the external, because what's happening on the outside may not be reflecting what's happening on the inside for yourself.
Yeah, I totally agree. I honestly just think like everyone can benefit from tracking their cycle. I just think like a lot of people ignore it just simply because they were never taught from a younger age about it, like we mentioned earlier in the episode. But it's never too late to learn about your cycle. And this is probably jumping the gun a little bit, but when you get to perimenopause and stuff like that, I feel like having a really solid understanding of your cycle now before you get there is going to benefit you when you do get there, because we're all going to get there. So I think sort of being really in touch with it is going to help you, go through changes that occur during that time, but also you can be aware of changes that may happen before that. So if you know your cycle and something doesn't seem right, you can be like, oh, hang on, this is a little bit out of character for my cycle. Let me keep an eye on this and just see how it goes over the next couple of months. Whereas if you don't know anything, you may not pick up on things like that too. So I feel like it can work in so many different ways. And like you said, I think there's probably quite a few coaches that listen to these episodes, but for myself as a coach, I keep all of my big projects to when I feel the best in my cycle, because I know that I'm most productive in that time, and I've got a lot of sort of a little bit more creativity and just general drive to get things done. And I'll save the sort of lesser intense or high, like lowest, I guess, size projects to kind of the end of my cycle when I'm maybe not feeling as great as I would. So it can work in so many different ways. That's just another classic example of the way you can use it, I guess.
So good. Seriously, we could go on a tangent about this for like hours and hours. But yeah, before we finish off, like, Sophie, thank you so much for joining me. Like, today's chat was a real eye opener, and it's always good to like reflect back on how far we've both come in terms of like our own fitness journey, but also how we are as coaches, these days. Now, where can our listeners find you? Like, what platforms are you on right now?
I'm actually only on Instagram. So I'm not on Facebook. Well, I'm on Facebook personally, but not business-wise. I only have Instagram at the moment, which is just Sophie May Fitness. And I do have a podcast as well, which is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. And that's just called the Sophie May Fitness Podcast. Super simple. No funny names, just my name. And that's pretty much me.
I love it. So good. Well, girls, hope you jump onto Sophie's page, get all the information you need. I know for a fact that she has a lot of useful educational posts on there regarding everything that we've literally spoken about today. So yeah, go have a bit of a stalk, say hi to her. I'm sure she doesn't bite. She'll say hello back. But if you all enjoyed today's podcast, make sure that you recommend it, share it, screenshot, and tag us at Women's Fitness Academy, tag myself, tag Sophie. And then till next time, be a little bit more diligent with your cycle and your programming.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been so awesome.